The Gaza Strip sees its fourth month of war. The World Health Organization warns the healthcare sector is collapsing at a rapid pace. Hospitals report dozens more casualties after a night of heavy airstrikes. Canadians continue to worry about their family members who remain stuck in that region. But today, a sliver of hope for those hoping to be reunited with their loved ones. A new temporary visa program set to allow 1,000 Palestinians into Canada is now accepting applications. The program would allow family members of Canadians to seek refuge here for 3 years. Marc Miller is the Minister of Immigration. Minister, welcome back to the show.
Thanks for having me on. Happy New Year.
Happy New Year, Minister. Applications for this program open today. How quickly can successful applicants start to hear back of whether or not they can get passage to Canada?
Well, this is, David, a pretty quick process to get into place, all things being said. Obviously, in a humanitarian crisis that is Gaza, we want to get people to safety as quickly as possible, but there are concerns in and around safety. So the three-stage process that was launched today is one that will require people to submit information and in some cases go through biometrics in Cairo. So we want to get people to safety as quickly as possible. It's something that we committed to, but it's something that will take some time. No guarantees being that we can actually get people out, in this case of the Rafah border crossing, because these are elements that are not under the control of Canadian authorities. But the objective here is to make sure that people that have loved ones with a connection to Canada can come here for some temporary safety while the crisis continues.
Okay, you touched on a few things here that I wanted to explore. Let's start with just getting them out of Gaza in the first place, because that is an enormous challenge, because Egypt and Israel control the inflow and outflow of people through the Rafah border crossing. So have you secured any guarantee from those two states that people Canada picks for this program will be able to get out and get into Egypt and make their way to Canada?
No, we haven't. And in fact, in addition to those two actors, Hamas, a terrorist organization that has committed untold atrocities, has their word to say and sometimes plays games at that same border crossing. So the concern is extreme, and the undertakings are often ones that are tenuous at best. We saw and had experience with that, with trying to get out Canadian citizens themselves out of Gaza, with windows opening and closing sometimes on very short notice. So it's something we'll have to work with on the ground with the authorities. The Israeli authorities and security people have their own view as to what a list would look like, and names on those lists, and undoubtedly would subject them to some verification. Once that is achieved, Canada would do its own biometrics in Cairo. So no guarantee that people can get out, but the effort is worth it, and it's one that there has been significant attention to in Canada and demands from Canada to act. We think this is the humane thing to do for Canadians that have connections to people that are trying to just simply stay alive. And we're quite hopeful that we'll be able to do that, but it will require the same work that we put into getting Canadians out just a few short weeks ago.
Is it more difficult to do, knowing that these people who you would be trying to get out are not Canadian citizens? I mean, people who came out before with all of those complications were at least citizens of the country, which gave the embassy there a certain weight in dealing with the foreign states, but this would not be the case here.
Certainly, and I think, it isn't necessarily up to the host country, in Egypt in this case, to say that they're going to accept people based on a policy that Canada has put forward. When it comes to your own citizens or permanent residents, there's a different protocol. You wouldn't be performing, for example, biometrics on Canadian citizens seeking to flee a country. In this case, you have no certainty as to what the background of those people are. For historical reasons, Gazans tend to be heavily documented or have documentation. So there can be all sorts of issues and challenges along the way. What I would say, David, though, is that we have had some limited success in getting people out that aren't Canadian citizens and do have a connection to Canada. In some cases, some very young girls that were injured, and we were able to secure their safe passage from Egypt to Canada so that they wouldn't get returned to Gaza. So we have some experience in being able to do this, but now in an institutionalized way with a policy, it'll be something that'll come with some volume, and that's something that we'll do our best at. But again, no firm guarantees that we'll be able to achieve this goal.
The other complication I see here, Minister, is that you're looking for biometrics that are up to date. You're looking for passports. With people having to, say, flee their homes or having their homes bombed out, you know, inside Gaza, they may not have those. They could be lost. They could be destroyed. How do you deal with those complications if people just don't have these things that are required to take part of this program?
Well, what we won't be able to compromise is the security aspect of this, David. But when it comes to people's ability to identify themselves, there will have to be a process whereby we will apply, a risk-based analysis of what that looks like. If we're talking about someone, and I hate to speculate with events that have not happened, but when you're talking about some kids that have lost their parents, obviously, you're not going to be as worried about the security profile of some 4-year-olds as you will with respect to someone that perhaps is of adult age and has some history without documentation. So those are all on-the-ground analyses that we'll have to do, sometimes on a case-by-case basis. But we are confident that we will be able to welcome the numbers that we have announced publicly that we will be able to welcome, which for now is 1,000, but with some flexibility when we see the ultimate number.
The National Council for Canadian Muslims says 1,000 is not ambitious enough. It's too small of a number. And I wonder, Minister, does the website shut down once 1,000 people apply, or does it shut down once 1,000 people have been approved?
No, we're going to try. It would be pointless to sort of shut things down once sort of 1,000 applications come in of varying quality. We want to get a sense of what that volume is, and we will be flexible. We don't have a sense of what the numbers are that we're dealing with. We're speculating. People can have various iterations of family connections and various levels of desire to sponsor people. Obviously, I'm not presuming that people want to leave their relatives in a war zone, but clearly we'll look at that volume and be flexible in looking perhaps even to expand it if the volume does exceed 1,000. But for now, the website or portal just opened today. We're looking at relatively low volume, but again, it's too early to speculate whether that's just a temporary thing or something that'll last.
Expanded by what order of magnitude, Minister? Because as I referenced,
and I can't speak publicly about that, David. We'll have to have a conversation as a government to look at what that would look like. If we look at very large volume, we're going to want to start looking at what other countries can start doing. Clearly, this is a war zone and a disaster area where it is hard to just get food or water, and people's safety is constantly being threatened. So if we see very large numbers, it's something we'll have to look at our partners to see who can host people fleeing a war zone. But when it comes to family members and those that are subject to the policy, if we see numbers that make sense, I'm sure Canada will do as it always does and be flexible and open.
Omar is one Canadian who hopes he can be reunited with his family through this plan, and he joins us now. Omar, it's nice to meet you. Thanks for taking the time.
Thank you.
We just heard from the Immigration Minister, Marc Miller, who said there is some flexibility in how the government will assess the 1,000 recipients of the new temporary visa program. What's your reaction to what the minister had to say there?
Well, I think, this announcement came too late for all of us. We've been panicking. We've been anxious the whole time. The whole community is being under stress from day one about this war until now. So when we saw the number, we felt that extremely disappointed. And I had people calling me crying. I was like, 1,000 number, but I'm bringing more people. And then we started having fights in between our own community, people saying, why should you bring your family members and why you should bring your family members, and all these things and problems caused by the Ministry of Immigration being not really obvious or even clear with us about what exactly their intentions are. I was listening to the Honourable Minister about the capacity that he's saying that he's speaking about, but at the same time, to what capacity? We are really worried, and 1,000 number is nothing.
Well, the 1,000, if you listen to the obstacles that need to be overcome that the minister laid out there, how optimistic are you that 1,000 people can even get out of Gaza with the permission of Hamas, of Israel and Egypt, and then meet the qualifications to get here? Because the obstacles are pretty significant there.
So I have contact. I lived in the Gaza Strip my whole life, and I have contact on the grounds with everyone. Even I worked with international organizations in the Gaza Strip, and I get information from the Gaza Strip and also from people who left, people who are leaving the Gaza Strip, and the names are actually published online in thousands. The idea of giving that there are too many obstacles is a little bit alarming for all of us. Plus, that when we see that they are talking about too many obstacles and at the same time talking about 1,000-person only, this for us makes us feel more uncomfortable about what exactly the government is thinking of. Yeah.
Well, surely there's things like Egypt could say no, Israel could say no, Hamas could say no. These are things that are outside of Canada's control. But you say 1,000 isn't enough. I mean, what would be an acceptable number for Canada to take in, keeping in mind these are not Canadian citizens?
In previous cases, let's remember, in previous cases, there was no cap. There was nothing about numbers. In previous cases, Canada just brought people who needed refuge, period. And that was the whole case. In previous cases, even Canada brought people who doesn't even have ties to Canadians here or ties to Canada. And those people are now PR. So I think that question should be is, why do we even have a cap?
Well, there's a cap on Afghan refugees, for example, that were taken in, right? I think it was much higher than 1,000, obviously, but there have been caps. So I just, if 1,000, like an uncapped relocation plan is what you want to see, or is it just a larger number than 1,000?
Well, there are the criteria. The criteria is talking about extended family members and nieces and nephews, etc. So you're not talking about 100,000. We're not talking about 30,000. You're talking about very limited numbers of people.
Right.
But the idea of having one cap made all of us being very exhausted of thinking what exactly is happening, because we don't know the numbers. The Canadian government does not know the numbers. He just mentioned that they will measure the numbers. They want to see the sense of the numbers of people that are applying and eligible as well. We're not talking about transfer. These people, and most of these people, will actually go back to the Gaza Strip, including my family, including my parents. I was begging my parents to come to Canada for years, and they never wanted to come here. But after they lost everything, these people have no infrastructure to go and survive, and they need healthcare. So that's the minimum. I can get them refuge for 3 years. I am 100% confident that many of these people will go back.
Right. So I know you've been filling out forms all day since the webpage opened, trying to get people here. Who are you trying to get here, and how are they doing right now in Gaza? What are you hearing from them?
Well, we've heard from many international organizations and reputable human rights organizations that Gaza is facing starvation. So, number one, if you survive a sniper bullet or a bomb here and there, you might not survive starvation. The situation there is extremely severe. I don't think many people understand the intensity of the situation in the Gaza Strip. It's really, really severe. What I want Canada to do is to proceed with this as soon as possible. We can't wait for more on this.
You mentioned, though, your parents, who you're trying to get here. How many people do you hope that would meet the qualifications you can bring to Canada under this program?
Well, I have my parents, I have my sisters, and I have my sisters and brothers-in-laws and their families. We're talking about between 5 to 10, 15 maximum. I don't really know if the whole policy applies to all of them, because we do have also a limit for the age of siblings for 22, for example, and people are even raising the concern about this. In a Palestinian culture, siblings can be over 22 and they are still single, and they're still dependent on their family, because the Gaza Strip has no work. The unemployment rate is extremely high. So people want these people to get out to seek refuge and have a good life in Canada.
Is your family safe? We've spoken with Palestinian Canadians with family in Gaza who have suffered just enormous losses throughout this conflict. How has your family endured throughout this?
So I will answer about my family, and also I want to raise the voices of those who lost family members while they were waiting for this policy, and those who lost extended family members and even parents in the Gaza Strip after the policy was published, and from the policy was published in December 21st to January 9th, we lost people from our own community who are direct family members. And that's why I'm saying about the urgency of the situation. For my parents, sometimes they're safe, sometimes they're not safe. And the reason because of that is the Israeli army moves in some areas and bomb some areas, and then they come back, and then they withdraw from the same areas. So the battles are from block to block, and they go in and out the whole time. Sometimes I get lucky and I get hold of them, maybe once a day, maybe once a week. Like we never know. It's a survival mode.
Right. Well, Omar, I hope your parents and the rest of your family are safe. Thank you so much for speaking with us today.
Thank you.